Welcome to the Stoa. The Stoa is a digital campfire where we cohere and dialogue about what matters most at the knife's edge of what's happening now.
Welcome to the Stoa, where we explore the knife's edge of this moment. I'm AJ Bond. I will be facilitating the interview today on a topic that is very much at my knife's edge in my life right now. And our guest is Brad Blanton, who is a psychotherapist and an author, speaker, workshop runner. He is the author of, I believe you said, Brad, 7.5 books, including the bestseller, which is the topic of today's session, Radical Honesty. And Brad, just to kind of get started, I'd love to hear how you're doing right now. And I have this curiosity how someone who practices radical honesty even goes about answering that all too ubiquitous question. How are you?
Well, I'm pretty good. I make a comparison about days that have been better and days that have been worse. I'm kind of obsessed with the news, and I usually end up getting depressed and pissed off every night or every other night. Try to keep it to Tuesdays and Thursdays, but it doesn't work too well. I like watching the news. I think someone's contributing a lot to my wealth these days. His name is Donald Trump, because he's such a shining example of the opposite of what it is I teach about. So he's a poster child for what not to do.
Mm-hmm. I love that. There's a silver lining to all this.
Yeah, so the book sales have quadrupled in the last 3 years. The last year, Radical Honesty Enterprises here and in Europe, altogether, we've done over 100 workshops in a year in 10 different countries and 3 languages. And basically, we are growing in number and influence, and the world is coming toward us. People are getting tired of being lied to and bullshitted and conned, and not as though it's about to end, but that people are talking about it differently than they did before.
Yeah, it's very much alive in my life right now. One of the other facilitators in this group actually mentioned radical aliveness, and he's here, Tyson. And when I heard that phrase, I was like, that's what I want in my life. Maybe you could give us a bit of an introduction. Like, what does radical honesty mean for you?
Well, radical honesty was the first time my book came out was called Telling the Truth. It was in hardback, and it didn't do that great. And I went to a few book conventions and started learning something about marketing. And one of the phrases I'd used in it but hadn't put in the title was radical honesty. When I changed the title to Radical Honesty, How to Transform Your Life by Telling the Truth, it became a bestseller. Because before, everybody thought they knew about telling the truth, but nobody thought they knew anything about radical honesty. So basically, I started watching how I said things and saying them, uncovering more. The general idea is that if you're willing to share what you notice, that you are acknowledging thereby that noticing is more important than thinking. And that thesis, that noticing is more important than thinking, is throughout the whole series of Radical Honesty books.
So let me see if I can completely get this. We're are culturally predisposed to overthink as opposed to just really noticing what is actually happening in this moment. Is that accurate?
Yeah. But almost anything is overthinking. Our whole culture, our whole tradition is to overvalue thinking. And part of what we say is that thinking itself is not as important, period, as we think it is.
Is there something about thinking that leads us towards dishonesty?
It is implicitly likely to lead you away from honesty, in the sense that you're more concerned, the further you go into your ideation, the more you're concerned about the performance of the idea, and the more concerned you are about convincing other people of how right you are, and so forth. So that basically, we have a model of awareness, which is that you can take everything you can possibly be aware of in your life and easily divide it into three categories. You can notice what's going on in front of you right now. That is what you see, you hear, and stuff like that. You can also be aware of what's going on within the confines of your own skin right now.
Like feelings, somatic stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you can also be aware of what you're thinking. And that's all there is. There isn't anymore. We call it inside, outside, upside down. And this we call upside down because usually it's bullshit.
So there's something about like just observing what is, as opposed to, I guess, as you said, anytime I start thinking, it's an interpretation, it's a story, it's an analysis, it's getting away from just observing.
Yes, that's right. It's at least a step or two away, because as when you start noticing you're noticing, you can sort of judge how much time are you primarily focused on thinking, and how much time are you focused on noticing your body, and how much time are you focused on noticing things outside of you. And are you, one important dimension that Fritz Perls taught me, I was trained in Gestalt therapy, and and one of the things he used to stress was that in addition to him thinking that the difference between noticing and thinking was that noticing was much more important. But one of the things that he stressed a lot was that if you are in contact with someone else, the quality of the communication is much more intense. And if you're withdrawn from someone else, it's much less intense. And so he talked about a dimension called contact and withdrawal. And I've sort of elaborated on it so that I say visual contact is you and I looking at each other right now. Verbal contact is us speaking to each other right now, and so forth. So there's the visual contact, verbal contact, ideational contact. So I can be speaking to you and not looking at you. So I can be partially in contact with you, but not as fully in contact. And what I've based on 35 years of practice of psychotherapy in Washington, D.C., where the largest majority of my clientele were lawyers, I had to actually naturally become an expert in lying, or I wouldn't have been able to have a practice. So
you had to speak their language, so to speak.
Yes, that's right.
Right.
And I did a lot of work writing about couples and about child rearing. And one of my favorite books is called Radical Parenting, because what I tell parents of young kids is what you have to teach your child is not as important as what they have to teach you that you forgot. That what they remind you of that you forgot is much more valuable to you and to them via you than anything you've got to teach them. So instead of going out there and trying to gear up with what they need to know and force it on them, you should just touch their feet and say, what should I do to serve you today, Master?
What's coming up for me is that the beauty of a child's it really is a kind of radical honesty. Like they just say it, and we as a culture say, "Oh, honey, like don't say that in the grocery store." And like it's like we slowly condition that radical honesty out of them. And I hear you saying that actually it's an opportunity for them to recondition us.
Yes, it's an opportunity for us to remind what we forgot when we were thinking about it instead of really being with it in a memory.
Mm-hmm. So there's a couple like little roads that I really want to go down. And I just want to say for those who are joining us, feel free to put some questions in the chat anytime they come up, and I'll keep an eye on them and pepper them in. And for the last half, we'll go to you guys and open it up, but put the questions in the chat. And that way we can keep the conversation going while the questions are kind of building up. I'm wondering, Brad, you talked about being a psychotherapist for a bunch of lawyers. Was there like an epiphany moment for you? Like, what was the catalyst in that environment where you were like, okay, it's got to be about radical honesty, or it's got to be about telling the full truth? I'm wondering what the birth was of this idea.
It wasn't just one aha experience. There was a whole bunch of them. I was also, part of my background is I got in the civil rights movement in Texas and throughout the South when I was 19 years old, which was 1959. I'll be 80 in a few months. Basically, I spent a lot of time in the civil rights movement. I did get shot at, lead pipe bombed, put in jail, and arrested 15 times or so. And basically, I also was a hippie, and I started taking acid when I was 20 and did lots of LSD. And basically, all of us knew who were about 30. When we said don't trust anyone over 30, we meant it, even after we were over 30. And it had something to do with realizing that people in positions of authority are not authoritative, that generally they're just as full of shit as they can be. And that now and then, if they're not completely full of shit, they're mostly full of shit. And so that entered into the way that I did therapy too. If people were not willing to tell the truth in their relationships to other people, I just said, that's it, I'm not seeing you in therapy. Go find another therapist who doesn't know what the job is. And after I'd done that for about 20 years, I finally wrote a book about it.
So there was this like inherent distrust of the man, of the system, because of what was happening culturally at that time. And it sounds like that bled into your practice. And you're just like, I mean, it's almost like some of your clients might have represented that authority. And what an exciting opportunity for you to confront them and say, your bullshit won't stand. Like it's not.
Yeah. A lot of the lawyers I saw retired. When you retire at 30, it's kind of like a possibility of a new career there.
Yeah.
Anyway,
and then go on.
I was just going to say that the life of sharing what you notice when you feel free to tell things that are not conventionally considered okay to talk about is a very nourishing life. You feel like you're able to relate to people in ways you haven't been before, and that it serves as an invitation. And that invitation is very attractive to other people, so that we started having little communities of people who grew up around what I ran a place called the Center for Well-Being. And the community just grew up naturally because when people finished with therapy, in about a year or so, we'd talk about what they got, but they would also come around and we would do a workshop or something because they liked sharing what they'd learned with other people. So it became, I ran more and more group therapy groups and more workshops. And eventually I designed a workshop called the 8-Day Workshop, which was to give people the benefits of a year of psychotherapy in 8 days intensive workshops.
And was this pre-radical honesty? Like this was just a building up to that?
This was during the evolution of radical honesty. That writing up a lot of that was what the book Radical Honesty came out in 94, I think, was about.
I imagine there's a contagious quality. You start being more honest, your peers start being more honest, their families start being more honest, and it kind of ripples out from there.
It does, yeah. It does. We have a bumper sticker, which is an attempt to do what we call honest marketing. And the bumper sticker says, radical honesty, it works pretty good most of the time. That's the extent of our PR effort.
Do you feel like there's like a radical honesty about radical honesty that sort of sees the limitations of radical
Yeah,
honesty?
yeah. Some now and then people are going to get pissed off and not want to ever talk to you again, won't agree to keep being honest. So basically, we have what we call this very compassionate philosophy called fuck them if they can't take a joke.
How do people react? Like, I'm a, the reason why this is so alive for me, Brad, is that I come from a very waspy family. I call it customer service. That's our default. It's like the customer's always right, and everyone is the customer. And I'm just constantly being nice and agreeing and people pleasing. And in my mind, radical honesty would really offend my Canadian waspy culture. And I think I desire it, but I'm afraid.
Good. If you say that to a group of people who are even waspy, they will know what you mean.
Right.
And they'll know what you mean because you've been doing it too. And you know that there's a certain constraint on you that's there day and night all throughout your whole life, which you don't really like. You would rather have the more unconstrained kind of like childlike innocence that allows you to say, I don't know when you don't know, or no, I don't want to do that, or I'm mad at you, or things like that. Like, no, to hell with you, I'm not doing that. Oh my God, that's terrible. But it's not so bad. It's the beginning of an honest conversation.
Like the theory behind it is so clear. I guess what I'm seeing is I'm wondering if people like me and a lot of people getting started need a kind of entryway, like a kick in the pants. It's like you want to just, what's the thing that gets the ball rolling so that you can do it? Or is it really just fucking do it?
Well, it's a little bit of both. What people usually complain about is the fact that it may be confrontational or offensive. But what's most scary about it is that you're vulnerable when you do that. You open up a kind of, instead of having your life oriented around defending yourself or your reputation in the minds of other people, you say, my reputation in your mind may be good or bad. That's not the main thing I'm going for. What I'm going for is telling you what I appreciate, what I resent, what I like, what I don't like, what I'm about in the world, and whether I like you or don't like you, whether I want you to like me or not like me, that I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to go a cut deeper. I'm going to tell you what's going on for me, what I notice going through my mind as what I notice in my sensations in my body and what I notice about you. And so that when you're talking to me, it's a kind of a dangerous thing because it's a little bit threatening to the usual role playing. It's more intimate than people are used to tolerating.
Do you find that there are some techniques aside from just being really honest to help invite that person to join you at that level? Because I think my fear is that I'll be honest and the person will just be like, and it's like, I'm like, I want to know, I want to see you as well. I want some equality here on the vulnerability front, I think.
Well, then your next step in honesty would be, my imagining is that you're not being completely honest with me.
Right. What I'm getting now is that the answer is always there. The answer is always
there, right?
The answer is my question. It's like, just
that's right.
Say it.
Exactly. That's it. You got it. All right, you're on the first rung. About 3 more years, you could be a radical honesty trainer.
I hope to be that in a de facto way at very least.
All right, good.
I mean, the topic that I am the most fascinated by, as many people here already know, is shame. And when I think of shame, it's a moderator. It's like I've got my honesty and my truth, and then shame comes in and completely moderates it all as to what's appropriate, what's good, what's bad, what's going to help, what's going to hurt. And it seems to me like shame is a the, if not one of the biggest kind of barriers to radical honesty. I wonder if that's something that resonates with you.
It resonates quite a bit, yes. The thing is that what you allow some limited set of sensations, which at the base level, shame is sensation based. You feel something in your body. There's an increase of heart rate and your blush and flush in the front of your chest and your face, and you feel warmth in your body in places different than you do, and you want to turn away and not be in the spotlight of attention. And so one of the things that we work with people is that when you are willing to experience an experience, it comes and goes. But when you resist an experience, it persists.
Yeah.
And one of the things that causes the resistance of the persistence of shame is that people resist being ashamed. And you could just say, well, I feel warmth in my face, and I imagine my face is red, and I guess my imagining is that I'm ashamed of what I just said to you, and I feel sort of like I want to twitch around and move around. And you stay with that experience, and every single second you stay with it longer, like an extra 10 seconds with it, you find that it's just a bunch of sensations. And that what we say, another one of our stickers is, life is just sensational when life is just sensational. And what happens is, if you're willing to be completely naked and bare as exposed, one of the things we do in the 8-day workshop is about the third day, everybody has to take off all their clothes.
Is that true?
Yeah, and then they have to stand up in front of the group, one person at a time, and talk about their body and point out what they're ashamed of and what they're proud of, where their scars came from.
Wow.
And they look at the other people and they walk around and talk to them, and people walk around and talk. People know they have to do that. The workshop costs like about $1,500 to $3,000, depends on when you took it. But basically, you don't get to go to the workshop unless you agree that you'll do that. You have to stand naked in front of people and talk about it. And you get videotaped when you're talking about your body. And then the next day, we ask them to come back in and sit next to the screen and watch their own videotape, and then tell us what their reaction is to watching themselves naked on videotape talking about their bodies.
Wow.
And so what we learned from this is that people so dreaded it, and some people didn't do the workshop and all this other stuff, but they would dread it and dread it. And then after they went through the experience, the next 3 or 4 days of the workshop, we have to keep saying, put your goddamn clothes on, put your clothes back on. Because we couldn't get people to quit being naked. Because actually not having anything to have to hide anymore is such a relief. And it's so funny. When people are laughing, we often say in that group, I'm not laughing with you, I'm laughing at you. Because people get to kind of enjoy shame, and it ruins it. It ruins shame as a motivating force. People think, well, you'd be ashamed if you did that. Yeah, I probably would. Let's see. And go and see if you were, because it wouldn't be like a life-threatening thing.
Brad, this sounds like a great Stoa session. Everyone gets naked over Zoom, and
yeah, it's kind of hard to be close enough over Zoom to have it be embarrassing enough to be worth doing. But
Wow, that I really love that. Thank you for that insight. I have a couple questions that are coming up in the text that I want to send your way. One of them is, have you ever pushed radical honesty too far and regretted it? Like, is there some such thing as too honest?
When people's feelings are hurt, I stay with them until they experience the hurt enough to let it go. And sometimes they are triggered into anger, and I ask them to experience the anger and to resent me for what I did, or to say, you hurt my feelings, or to cry if they feel sad. and to stay with the experience. The whole point of it is that radical honesty covers a multitude of sins, but the purpose of the sins is to not have them, the avoidance of such things that are triggered in you from what happened to you earlier in your life, to have that not be the theme of your life, that you can actually design and influence what your life is about only if you are able to inhibit just being run by triggers. That is, something gets triggered, and so you behave a certain way because you learned how to do that when you were 5 and a half or 9 or something like that. And you just reenact that without any consciousness.
Yeah.
And what happens when people start sharing, other people are honest with them. And people end up being moved with each other. So people cry a lot in these groups. I cry a lot. I'm a big sissy. And they jab me about it all the time, and it doesn't bother me. I just say, "Oh, that makes me sad." But the idea is that you have the experiences that you have, and you live them out loud, and you share them with other people. And so, when you're vulnerable, and when you're angry, you're angry, and you get angry until you get over it. It doesn't take but about 90 seconds. And you get hurt and you get over it. And so you have some kind of a way of saying to somebody, that's okay. If you hurt my feelings, I'll be hurt and I'll get over it. Instead of like staying alienated from you for 20 years because you hurt my feelings somewhere back here in 1993.
There does seem to be something powerful about you need someone there to be honest too. So it's like, it seems important, as you said, to stay with the person, yeah, I'm angry. Yeah, I'm pissed off. Yeah, you're angry. But let's stay in community until we're back to a kind of connection or equilibrium.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And also be more and more specific. So it may start out just, well, you're an asshole and I don't like you. Well, that's good. That's better than nothing. But then we try to get down to the fact, I resent you for saying I should read that book. I don't want to read that goddamn book. I tried to read it. I resent you for saying that. And some of your smaller but pettier resentments start coming out. And it turns out, after we've been in an 8-day workshop, everybody has to admit that we're all petty. We're all just petty, little nitpicking, little nasty little bitches and bastards. and it's also pretty funny because when it's shared, you mean you actually got up and left Thanksgiving and didn't go to Thanksgiving dinner anymore just because someone put their fork down too hard when they were mad? Yes, I did. Well, your whole life is run by those kind of reactions then, I guess.
It's occurring to me that self-awareness obviously has to be a big piece of this puzzle in order to be able to, like, I'm assuming you want to take those triggers and put them into your consciousness by saying, I'm noticing a trigger, or I'm noticing this. But for a lot of people, it's really hard to disidentify from that. Is it just about practice, or is there some tools there?
Well, it is hard to disidentify from that, but it's also very rewarding to get over things like that. Like when you used to be afraid to say to the boss, no, I don't want to do that. And you say to the boss for the first time, no, I don't want to do that. And I resent you for every goddamn time you've asked me to do it too. and the boss says, well, damn, I didn't know you had that in you. And you say, I didn't either. And what happens is there's a whole different level of conversation.
Do you find that you talked about that petty resentment. I imagine there's a backlog that's built up. And the first time you practice radical honesty in like a situation like that, you kind of have to say, and there's a backlog. Like there's a lot of resentment I wish I had said. You want to clear the slate.
Yeah. And if you are open to them clearing their slate with you,
right,
then the whole relationship for both of you is changed and in a more nourishing direction, where you feel heard and seen and known and talked to, and they do too. And it's that deeper level of intimacy that I'm saying we need. Like right now during this crisis, it's just, you can't watch TV at night without seeing instances of it. There's this new, strange new normal is going to get born here, and the new normal is going to require more honesty, because radical honesty is becoming obvious. Whenever an expert says something and then Donald Trump says something on top of it that's the reverse, and you say, well, who should I believe, the political authority or the scientist? The question about who's believable or not is pretty obvious. And what's happening is there is a change in the culture where we don't want to be cheered up with some kind of false bullshit happy talk that's just bullshit in the first place. I'm not interested in being treated like a child to be controlled in some kind of like jail. I don't want to live in the jail of a mind that says, watch out, be careful, don't offend anybody, tiptoe through your whole life, act like your whole life is on eggshells, and try to get through to the end without being too embarrassed. And what I want people to say is, fuck that. I'm not interested in that.
Mm-hmm.
And people who do that resent the hell out of it, and they're not very happy even when they're acting happy.
Yeah, I relate to that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to open it up now. There's a lot of really cool questions, and why don't I let the question askers actually ask their questions?
Okay.
I asked one of them already, but I just want to, the next question, Raven, I'd love for you to ask your question. But before you do, I just want to preface that in the digital world we live in, there's a lot of opportunities for one-sided honesty, where you do a podcast that's really honest, or you do Zoom classes that are really honest. And I have noticed that it creates these one-sided connections where people know almost too much about you sometimes. And I feel like that really connects with Raven's question. So why don't you jump in, Raven? You can just unmute yourself.
Sure. Hi. Thank you for being here, Brad.
Hi, thank you.
Yeah. So my question is about the role of the private. Is there a role of the private or privacy in your framework of radical honesty?
Our automatic inclination is to withhold. But what I say in radical honesty is that the most pernicious form of lying is just not saying what you know. So that it's being featured these days in the whole conversation worldwide about the virus is when do you withhold information? And the most deadly thing we've done as a species with this virus is delay the sharing of information that was available by just 2 or 3 weeks, killed thousands and thousands of people. And the attempt to preserve something in your imagination, you want to preserve some people's impression of you. Usually you want to make sure you preserve a good impression in the mind of other people. And what you would risk if you said, well, I don't know, what do you think of me, to them? You'd be like leaving it open for them to make their own independent judgment without you controlling it in some way. And when you do that, what comes from other people mostly is gratitude. Because they think, well, thank you for asking. I'm glad you want to know. I appreciate us having the honest conversation about it, rather than just trying to make a good impression and then make me like you. It's the reason that I called radical honesty sort of an overall rubric is because when you keep being honest, you're honest about how you were honest the last time. And they're honest about what their reaction was the last time. And then you start being honest about what you didn't be honest about the last time. And then what happens is you feel mostly gratitude because you're known by them and you know them and you accept and value each other. And it's not just that they conned you into liking you, it's that they actually appreciate you for what you are actually like and what you actually said and did. And that's much more nurturing than just getting applause for a performance.
Thanks, Brad. Reno, I really liked your second question about the life experiences, the writing. Why don't you ask that?
Hey, thank you. So my question was, it's my understanding that the writing process becomes a sort of therapeutic process for authors. And what I wanted to know is what you learned about yourself while writing Radical Honesty.
Thanks. That's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Let's see if I can come up with an answer. I had a moment when I was writing the book Radical Honesty, about the middle of it. I realized that I hadn't said why I was writing that book. And it was a background motivating force for me, but I wasn't sharing it with people. So I just started writing. The reason I'm writing this book is I want to build my reputation in the minds of other people. I want to become famous. I want people to think I'm smart and a wise man and to buy my books and give me praise and give me a whole lot of money. I'm greedy and I want to have, and so I went on until I got tired of it. Then I edited it a little bit, but I left it in the book. And it turned out that lots and lots of people, when they got that part of the book, wrote me letters and have since then, like, sent emails and lots of other things. They really appreciated that I just sort of stumbled onto that and then went ahead and elaborated on it. And then that was in the book because I was being honest about wanting to get attention and be famous and to have an impact. And I wanted to help people. I have lots of themes of helping people. And I have helped a lot of people, I think, and that's basically what I wanted to do. So every now and then when I'm writing, something comes across like that, and I just say whatever it is as best I can. So that my performance for me is to perform, not performing.
Thank you. Wow. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. It's a great question.
That last line you just said, Brad, about performing, not performing, brings up something that Peter and I have been discussing about when we're trying to be authentic. Is it authentic, or is it more like our best approximation of authenticity, our best approximation of noticing? You know what I mean? Like, is there some degree of performance, but it's like a performance rooted as hard as you can in reality?
No, we're not perfectly anti-perfectionism, but we're against it. So I have this saying I ask people to recite: anything worth doing is worth doing poorly. And I like people having say that over and over again because it's built into the say, what? Anything worth doing is worth doing well is the known dictum, but I say, go ahead and proceed when you don't know what you're doing. That's better because the protection racket you're building when you're making sure you get it right before you say it is withholding from other people. It's keeping the information from flowing. And it's like experts being able to say, I don't know. You know, when people ask me questions, I'm not supposed to say, I don't know. And I look for opportunities to say, damn if I know, what do you think? Because I like when people ask questions, you know, they have that answer implicit in there somewhere.
Right.
Yeah.
It's refreshing. Daniel had a really interesting question about certain substances. Daniel, do you want to come on and ask your question?
Yeah, perfect. If you can hear me, I just pulled over. So am I coming in?
Yeah, we can hear you. Thanks.
Awesome. Hey, Brad, I met you with
Hi.
Curzon in New York City years ago and interviewed you with the Rob Rods, if you remember.
Yeah, hi.
It was great to see you, and thanks for all your work. I just see it trickling all over the world and in my events, and it's an honor to talk to you briefly here.
Thank you.
What I remember, one of the things I remember about our conversation was how you were making kind of fun of yourself, that you like pot and alcohol a little too much. And through many of my years, including myself, I love pot and alcohol. I really love it. But for some reason, there's this I feel like there's been an underlying guilt that bubbles up around that. especially if I had a really good time, like if I smoked pot and had a best time ever, then I'm like, oh, was it because of the pot or something around there?
Mm-hmm.
And I really believe including Perzan, because I think Perzan went completely sober, that I've almost thought of that. I'm like, is that the only way to not feel guilty about these substances, is to completely quit them? Or do I just need to love the guilt more? And my question to you is, can you relate? And if you have kind of figured a way to be in more harmony with those substances yourself?
What I was just talking about anything worth doing is worth doing poorly, is one of the things that I'm writing a book right now called Contact and Withdrawal. And it talks about how you can be in verbal contact and physical contact, and we can shake hands, look each other in the eye, and speak to each other. And we have all these different kinds of contact. And then we can turn and walk away from each other and walk out the door, and we've withdrawn. And one of the things that Fritz Perls and I used to talk about a lot was having clean contact and clean withdrawal, so that you could contact someone, you're completely with them, and then when you go, you're gone the hell away. And that one of the things that I like about being stoned a lot of the time is that I don't particularly care about how my performance is going when I'm stoned. I'm just laughing around, playing music, or we're singing together or something like that. And you get so wrapped up in the very sensations of it that I find it to be good for that grounding in sensations in the body, that form of grounding. So I like it. So I ran for Congress about 8 or 9 years ago, and the reporters would ask me, have you ever used any illegal substance? And I said, I've done every illegal drug known to man, you know. And they would get really frustrated with me because they had all these shocking questions, and I not only answered them, I made up. I told them, you know, I'd shot up heroin, I'd done all these things, and I talked about them, not without shame, and they just became bored and walked off. And the thing is that if you don't have to hide something, if it's not a bad thing, if it's not something that shame is running for you, that now and then you might get stoned, but you're not going to be like a stoner where you smoke it every damn day or something. And you might have a drink now and then, but you're not going to be drunk all the time. You might get drunk once or twice a year or something, but not like falling down drunk like a teenager or something. But you might have a drink and toke of a joint, and then it might not do it for a week. That's what I look for, something where it's not like basically being trapped by it because you have to avoid it because it's a bad thing or something like that. Freedom means you can do or not do something. And that each new moment of freedom is a new opportunity. So you could say, well, I've had like a year of sobriety, and I'll ask you about what the story was, and what'd you do beforehand, and do you need to stay in AA, in my estimation and your estimation? And some people do, and some people don't. And so my main value in this is freedom. It's freedom to make mistakes that are not so bad they kill you or hurt somebody else. And if you can moderate them so that you stay with them as they're hurt and they can get over it, then you're being a kind of presence in the world. And that's what this is all about. It's about being able to be a presence in the world, to be participating in acknowledging, noticing each other, and to be willing to be with each other and nourished by being with each other in that experience of being together. So it's not ever really a question, should I ever smoke pot? Or, you know, the thing is, I know that altered states of consciousness has contributed a lot to my ability to enjoy being alive in the world and to be nurturant to other people.
Yeah, thanks for exploring that with me. It seems to be a continuous unraveling for me, and definitely feel supported by you exploring it out loud with me and being here with you. So thank you, Brad.
If you end up in prison, blame it on me. All right.
All right, thanks again.
All right, it's nice seeing you.
Rhea, you had a couple really interesting comments and a question as well. I wondered if you wanted to jump in and ask one of them.
Sure. Kind of have to scroll up here. I think one question that I asked was, is it ever like inappropriate or not supportive to be radically honest? Like, is there ever a time when it's just not serving the greater good of the experience?
Yeah, I think if you're not clear with your agreements about other people, when you're honest about what they've said to you without their permission, that's violating something about their assumptions and yours. And that if you're radically honest about someone else and they haven't given you permission to, you need to talk to them and invite them to do that for themselves rather than you do it. And the other thing is, I'm not radically honest for moral reasons so much as I am for reasons of contact, for nurturance, for the benefit of people. And that right and wrong are not the main reason for being radically honest. So if I smoke a joint, I don't call the sheriff's office and say, hey, I was smoking a joint over here. I thought you'd be interested. And I just wanted to be honest about it. I don't think they would come over anyway. They'd say, just, you're stoned, go to bed and shut up. So anyway, that's it. That's the extent of my answer to that. I appreciate you for the question.
What's coming
I
up
appreciate you for the answer.
Thanks, Rhea. I'm still thinking about when you talked about the Gestalt therapy and the connecting thing, and there's been a mention of nonviolent communication in the chat. And in fact, just listening to you talk kind of reminds me of Marshall Rosenberg. Mm-hmm. And I wonder, in NVC, they have this concept of aliveness, which sounds similar. It's like when you really talk to someone honestly in the moment about what's happening in the moment, there's this kind of amazing type of connection. And it sounds similar to what you were talking about in terms of Gestalt, in terms of like the levels of connecting. I wonder if that sounds about the same to you, and if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Well, I like him, and I'm a little prejudiced against a lot of his followers because we had a lot of them in radical honesty groups, and we always have anger to deal with. Anger because they're always so, I don't know, that it seems to me that it's a little too moralistic. Mm-hmm. That, yeah, there's a right way to be nonviolent, and that's it, you know. I was in the civil rights movement, in the nonviolent civil rights movement, and I know that a lot of our accomplishments that I helped participate in had involved a threat of violence. I was an abused child, and my stepfather used to beat up my mother and my brother and me and stuff. And when I was 13 and a half, I took a piece of firewood and fractured his skull and broke 3 of his ribs and put him in a hospital for a day. And when he came back, I told him I had 2 shotguns I'd gotten and had him out in the orchard. And I said, the next time you hit anybody in this house, I'm going to kill you. And I ended up leaving home when I was just short of 14 years old. And I worked out a relationship with my stepfather later, included going back and beating him up one more time. And in the civil rights movement, one thing that we talked about, we were thinking about writing a book about this. My friend Booker T. Bonner, who just died last year, he and I were sitting in at a restaurant in Austin, Texas, after we'd integrated the theaters. And it was like 11 o'clock, the restaurant closed at night. We'd been there like for a couple of hours. We'd been there a couple of hours in the morning. We'd been sitting in there for 3 months. We'd go and occupy a booth, and then they wouldn't serve us, and we would be blocking their customers. So we'd have like 5 or 6 booths filled up. And so I was just mad that evening. I said, I'm tired of this. He said, I am too. And we just went around back of the porch, and it was closed. We banged on the door, and he opened the door. He knew us very well because we were there every day. He said, what do you want? And I said, I want you to desegregate this goddamn restaurant and come back here and kick your fucking ass. And he says, well, I'm a damn mean Swede and nobody tells me what to do. And BT says, well, I'm a mean nigger and nobody tells me what to do. And I said, I'm a mean goddamn redneck. If you don't integrate this son of a bitch, I'm going to kick your ass. And he slammed the door in my face. So that wasn't exactly what you call a nonviolent interaction. But the surprising part was, we went back the next morning at 10 o'clock, went in and sat at our usual place, and he comes walking in with a pad. Says, what can I get you? And I had to check to see if I had any money because we didn't expect to be able to actually have to pay for food. And so I ordered bacon and eggs, and so did BT. We had coffee, and we sat there and we ate our food and we drank our coffee. And nothing was said except just when I paid him the check and he handed me the change back, I looked at him and I said, thank you. And he said, thank you. And what happened was, he was abused child too. He's a big, like 6'5" Swede. He could have kicked my ass, I'm sure, but I would have absolutely gone after kicking his anyway. And he knew it because we were both hurt and abused children. And he integrated that restaurant. And it was the only integrated restaurant for 3 months. And everybody tried to make him not desegregate. But he was the damn mean Swede. And he wasn't going to let them tell him what to do. And so a lot of our expressions of resentment appear to be violent, but I don't agree. If you don't hit somebody in the face or something, that's not violence. As far as I'm concerned, you'd say, you low-life motherfucking son of a bitch, that's perfectly acceptable. I just wanted to get more particular about why they're a son of a bitch. And then get over it and say, well, I'm not as mad at you as I was before a while ago. He got over, he didn't ever know we were serious until I threatened to kick his ass. So I think nonviolence has to be defined as either physical violence or not, because I don't like the definition of violence just using categories, because it's not intimate enough and to get over.
What that story, I feel, really points a spotlight on the culture that's forming around social justice issues today. And I'm not sure how much you have your finger on that pulse, but there is a real movement towards right speak. And like, even in your stories, the N-word came up. And when you said the word sissy, I tweaked on that. Like, part of me was like, oh, you're not allowed to say sissy, and I'm allowed to now get offended. And I'm wondering how you react to that new culture.
I just say, God knows I'm sorry, and say it again. But it's like, basically, I'm a self-righteous prick myself. I know what it is to be such a righteous fool. And I've been a righteous fool plenty of times. And I'm less righteous. The older I get, the less righteous I am. And I'd say probably a lot of people would say the less right I am. But the less attached to righteousness I am. Because the nourishment that comes from sharing honestly is so much more important than being able to maintain the appearance of being well behaved.
It seems now the culture is so much about being right. And I hear you saying, and I feel this, especially from a shame standpoint, that being right doesn't actually connect us.
Right. Yeah, it does, but then it makes us just Republicans or just left-wingers or something.
Right. It's a very tribalistic
limiting. Right. Yeah.
Well, we're down to like the last 5 minutes. So I wonder, Brad, maybe you could tell us, I know you have at least 7 or 8 books, and you've got a new one obviously in the works. How can people connect with your work? Where should we start?
Well, there are a lot of exciting things going on this day. We were planning for a transition to building a strong online workshop. Over the last 4 years, we've been working on it. We put together lots of videotape from other workshops, and we have designed an online course, which you can find out about by going to radicalhonesty.com. And we have about 40 radical honesty trainers, about 15 here in this country, and the rest of them are in Europe. And we do workshops various places all around the world. At least they're interrupted now, but we're doing a few online workshops. And if you go to radicalhonesty.com, it's frequently changed. And there's also our presences on Facebook and social media. And basically you can find videotapes of various obtuse and ignorant and funny things that I've done, and a few embarrassing things if you look. And what happens is that there is this prejudice in favor of laughter that we have, and there's a lot of funny people. And a part of what we assign to people in training to be trainers is to go and do a stand-up comedy set or two and just see what it's like to get up there and try to be funny and not have anybody laugh, because that's a real examination of embarrassment there.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you say that? I thought it was funny. Well, it wasn't.
The proof is in the pudding. No one laughed.
Right. No one laughed.
There's no hiding in stand-up. I love that.
Yeah, right.
I assume you also make them do some kind of strip tease or something. That sounds like.
No, I think that's too easy in a stand-up place. It's too easy.
Well, Brad, this has been really refreshing, and I feel really inspired, and I'm sure other people here as well, to start going on this journey in a really kind of conscious way to be more radically honest. So I want to thank you so much for your honesty, of course.
Thank you.
And your humor and just your presence.
Thank you. Same to you. I really appreciate you for this whole conversation and everybody else that asked questions too.
Right. It was my pleasure.
Right.
So that's pretty much the end of our session, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. The Stoa runs on a gift economy, as you know. So if you want to go to thestoa.ca, you can help support it. And I also want to mention that there is another session in about half an hour that is on the theme of concept unfolding. I'm not entirely sure what it is, but it sounds really cool. So feel free to come back and check that out. And yeah, thanks so much. And thanks again, Brad.
Okay, thanks. See you later.
See you soon. Thank you, Brad.
You're welcome. Thank you.